So our next project has to do with positive and negative shapes. So our next project is going to focus on the idea of positive and negative shapes. There are two vocabulary terms that we are going to use during this project. The first one is composition. And a composition is the organization of elements of art within a two-dimensional piece. Design is similar to composition, but can be applied to all kinds of art, including three-dimensional and time-based pieces. So these two vocabulary terms are all about what an image looks like on the page. So this is something we're going to come back to again and again this semester. We're not just focused on drawing an object realistically. We're focused on the entire art piece. So anytime you think about your work of art, you're thinking about the whole page, not just one little section of it. Now, positive and negative space is grounded in the idea of figure versus ground. We perceive shapes by mentally detaching them from their surroundings. We refer to this relationship as figure and ground. So, for example, in this image that we see here, the figure would be the man. It's the shape that we detach and focus on. The ground is the surrounding visual information. And in this piece, a lot of it is blank, but a good example of the ground, do you see that little triangle shape that's made by the extension of his arm and the cane? When you see that, you can see a little triangle, right? That would be considered the ground. Now, we think about positive versus negative shapes and figure versus ground is all about how you balance a piece and create an interesting composition. In this piece, what part is the figure and what part is the ground? Is the yellow the figure? Or is the dark purple the figure? Some of you may think it's the yellow is the figure and the purple is the ground. Some of you might think the purple is the figure and the yellow is the ground. It all depends on your point of view. This interplay between the figure and ground is something that's known as positive versus negative shapes. So there's that piece we looked at in the beginning PowerPoint, it's an MC Escher. At the top you can see the bird is the figure and the white is the background. But as you go down the composition, it flips, right? The fish becomes a figure and the black becomes the background. And somewhere in the middle, they both exist. Now, in a good composition, the positive and negative shapes should balance each other and be equally important. That brings us back to this piece, right? The idea that those two shapes can exist together, both the vase and the two faces, and they hold equal weight and equal importance. So for our next project, we are going to focus on that idea of positive versus negative shapes. Your goal this week is to go out in nature. You're going to create 8 thumbnails. There's a little video that's going to talk about the thumbnails right after this too. And you're going to create interesting compositions where the positive and the negative space are balanced. So you want them to take up equal space. And you're not going to draw any details, unlike the last few projects. You're not going to draw any of those interior contour spaces. You're only going to draw the outlines of the figure. So your figure should exist only as outlines. And anywhere they overlap, leave that out too. It makes a more interesting composition. All right, so like I said, make sure you watch the next video that is about the thumbnails, because you're going to create 8 thumbnails of these natural objects.